So as usual, we start with some breathing meditation just to calm the mind, followed by setting the motivation. So before we take refuge, let's visualize the refuge field or the object of our refuge in the space in front of us in the form of Buddha Shakyamuni appearing as a fully ordained monk. Seated on an open lotus, on top of which is a sun disk and a moon disk. With the Buddha being inseparable from all other enlightened beings, and of course inseparable from your Lama. And around the Buddha, visualize all these great beings who've attained realizations through listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Buddha's teachings. In particular, the Nalanda masters, Nagarjuna, Ayadeva, Bhavaviveka, Chandakirti, and so forth. But also visualize the great lamas of Tibet up to this present day. And also those of other traditions. Inspiring us and showing us that we ourselves can attain all these realizations, all these transformations of the mind. And of course, representing the three jewels, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And in order to generate bodhicitta, Let's focus on the main object of that mind, which is all sentient beings who are surrounding us, who are all around us. Think endless sentient beings are seated wherever there's some space. Who enable us to become enlightened. Since we can become a Buddha only in dependence on sentient beings. Our spiritual progress being dependent on them. Yet although they help us to transform our mind, they experience so much unwanted suffering. Seeing no way out, or even if they do, unable to apply the Buddha Dharma effectively to overcome their root cause of suffering. So we should take personal responsibility to help them and fast generate affectionate love. A deep sense of care and closeness towards each and every sentient being, no matter who they are and how afflicted their mind may be. That this affectionate love is not enough, since sentient beings are suffering. So let's generate great compassion, an affectionate state of mind that wishes for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and its causes. And aspires that I myself may be able to help them to overcome all their suffering and its causes. And that aspiration then becomes stronger and gives way to the altruistic attitude, which is a determination that I myself will do whatever it takes to lead sentient beings out of suffering and its causes. Try to feel that, the deep sense of love, and a very strong determination. Since realistically we can only really accomplish that once we've become enlightened, that's then again motivated by deep care and compassion, generate the mind of enlightenment, the wish to become fully enlightened, the welfare of all sentient beings. And then, without letting go of bodhicitta, recite the prayers, and with them strengthening our mind of enlightenment even more. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. To further deepen our love and compassion towards all sentient beings, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And again, directed at visualization in the space in front of us in order to accumulate a lot of merit and purify our mind. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present every type of offering, actual and imagined, I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. And rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. And turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others to the great enlightenment. All right. So now for this coming week, it's still great compassion. I still don't want to move on to the next type of mind, simply because, well, great compassion is said to be the turning point, in the sense that you've all heard of Buddha nature, of course, but Buddha nature is also sometimes described in the context of awakening our Buddha nature. So not only do we all have Buddha nature, but there's also a time as part of our practice when we awaken that Buddha nature. And we awaken our Buddha nature. So usually, according to the scriptures, when do we awaken? What do we need to do to awaken our Buddha nature? And the scriptures usually say that we need to generate great compassion. Great in what way? Well, great, first of all, because the focus is not just on one person or two people or even countless sentient beings, because countless is really just a way of saying a lot of sentient beings, but all sentient beings, even if they're infinite, in the sense that no matter who we think of, whether we know them or we don't. I mean, if we were to get to know them now, they'd totally be included. So not a single sentient being would be excluded from our compassion. In that way, great. But also great in the sense, of course, that not only do we wish all sentient beings to be free from suffering, but we want to help them to bring this about. We take responsibility to work towards leading sentient beings to a state free of suffering. And not just suffering, it's important, of course, here we discuss the 3 types of suffering. I mean, any type of limitation. Well, first of all, whatever prevents sentient beings from being liberated, from being totally liberated, or if you want to even take it further, to help them to overcome whatever keeps them from being completely enlightened. So in that way, it's great as well. So that's therefore it's really difficult, of course, because, well, first of all, we've gone through this. We want to, unless we aspire ourselves to be free, at least from anything that is in the way to becoming liberated, we don't sincerely wish it for others. And all sentient beings, that's pretty overwhelming. And taking personal responsibility makes it even harder. But this is just the nature of our mind. And recently, modern science, neuroscience has come to an understanding which actually supports that, which is neuroplasticity, that our mind, no matter how old we are, our brain can change at all times. It always undergoes changes. In fact, it does. With every mental movement, the brain changes. So that just supports the fact that our mind does too, that our mind is able to develop to such a degree that our compassion can grow endlessly. Buddha's compassion is endless. So Buddha's love is endless. Our compassion and love can grow endlessly. Endlessly doesn't mean it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. In that sense, grow endlessly. No, but endless in the sense it's directed towards all sentient beings. Like anything wonderful, a Buddha wishes for sentient beings. The most wonderful state a sentient being can attain. And there's no limit to these great qualities, like the Buddha's qualities. So all these qualities a Buddha wishes for other sentient beings to have, and of course, limitless sentient beings. So in that way, it becomes limitless in that sense. So these limitless enlightened qualities plus focusing on limitless sentient beings. So this is the kind of goal, but already with great compassion, you can see it's got that aspect of limitlessness, at least with regard to sentient beings. So to focus on that, no matter how obnoxious someone might be, no matter who they are, we may not know them, they may live in a different world system, it doesn't matter what realm, who they are, how terrible they may be. Understanding that they still have Buddha nature, their terrible actions are not in the nature of their mind. And of course, they harm themselves, mainly they harm themselves. They can never harm others as much as they harm themselves through their destructive actions. And so again, with the sense of course, deep compassion, deep care. So whoever it is, may I be able to, well, may they be free from whatever limits them, and may I be able to help them to reach that. So make an extra effort again for this week, and then make it stronger. And we haven't gone through the altruistic attitude yet, but you might as well, you know what it's like, what it feels like, what it's all about, and go from there to then from the altruistic attitude towards bodhicitta. And for this week, again, you start off with in the morning, that's your causal motivation, which then when you engage in activities, well, at that time, if you can, remember as often as you can that determination, that type of, well, that kind of, that compassionate mind that wishes to help all sentient beings to be free from their suffering, and then of course take it towards the mind of enlightenment. All right, okay, this is again great compassion once again for this coming week. Then I want to answer Jimmy's question. He's sent in some questions. I won't be able to answer all of them. Actually, I haven't even dealt with this question from last week because there wasn't enough time. But actually, I believe if I answer his questions of this week's question, well, it'll include the question he asked last time. So he's saying, these are questions, but correct me if my observations are wrong. So there are quite a few of them. We mentioned the 4 sets of 4, the 16 types of emptiness plus the 4 types of emptiness, which aim to include all phenomena. But how about the emptiness of substantiality? Okay, so it seems like also from his last question, substantiality is like a big issue for him, like substantiality, volume, mass of objects. So the grasping at them at being inherently existent. Okay, he's got a good point here. He says, am I right to think that it's very important in modern times because we have such strong grasping for the truly existent substantiality, volume, and mass of objects? And if we don't overcome that grasping, how can we attain the formless body of a Buddha, the gnostic body, the Buddha body in the nature of mind, as described in Buddhist treatises, also in Vesna Wallace's article? Okay, now this is the first part, and I may not go beyond this today because quite a few happening from there. But this article should not be misunderstood. First of all, it's from the point of view of the Kalachakra Tantra, which is a little different from other tantras, quite unusual also in its way to describe, for instance, what's called the Jnanakaya. It's a little different. And no way I can even attempt to explain it. I'm not qualified in any way. So if anyone has interest in understanding this article, and there was a link posted, I think last week, maybe Dalit could post the link again. It has the article in it. Well, you need to get the Kalachakra initiation and receive the commentary by a fully qualified master. So like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Kyabche Jadu Rinpoche, and so forth. So there are some qualified masters who know about the Kalachakra system, but would really know well about it. But the thing is, what I can say is this much. this should not be misunderstood. It's not saying that a Buddha doesn't have a physical body. This is where the terminology can be confusing. In the Pali tradition, for instance, they use terms such as Rupakaya and Namakaya. Rupakaya means the body, and in the Sanskrit tradition, it's used slightly differently, but there's also this usage of the word kaya, as in like body. So there's the Rupakaya, which is the physical body, and there's the Namakaya. Nama is very interesting. Well, Sanskrit and English being both part of the Indo-European languages. So there's some words that are quite similar. Nama, name. So if you're familiar with the 12 links, you have name and form. So Rupakaya and Namakaya. So Namakaya means of the 5 aggregates, those aggregates which are not physical. So Rupa here is the physical, is the body, and then Namakaya is kind of like the mental body, the mind, the mental aspect. So it's not literally a body. In the Sanskrit tradition, the qualities of a Buddha are described by talking about kayas, bodies, again, translated in English into Tibetan as bodies, and also in English into English as bodies. But they're not bodies in the literal sense, because a Buddha has a rupa kaya, has a physical body, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to perceive the Buddha, talk to the Buddha, teach or learn from his example. We wouldn't be able to do that because we can't see a Buddha's mind. We can't see the Buddha's mental qualities. So what we can see is the Buddha's body. It is not made of coarse particles and atoms. This is how it's explained, although it seems to be. But that's beyond our capacity to at least know with our sense consciousnesses. It seems to us as an ordinary body that behaves in an ordinary sense. But without that body, we couldn't communicate with the Buddha. But then there's subtler types of bodies. There is the subtle energy. Well, the subtle energy actually, ordinarily, I should not talk about it that way. Actually, as an ordinary being, like ourselves, we talk about a coarse body and a subtler type of body. So the coarse body is our coarse body that is made up of atoms that we took on when we were reborn. And then there's the subtler type of body, which includes the subtle energy winds in our body. And then, of course, there's the mind, which is also can be described, well, if you use the word namakaya, then you can describe it as, the mental aspect. And that's not a body in the literal sense. So we have the coarse body, which is the ordinary body made of flesh, blood, bones, etc., made of atoms. And then you have the energy, the subtler energy that goes along with the consciousness that the consciousness is based on. You can go even subtler with regard to the subtlest mind, but even without saying this. So just not even talking about the subtler clear light mind that has a very subtle energy with it. I mean, just summarizing it in the form of the energies in our body versus the coarse body. In a Buddha's body doesn't have that coarse aspect, but still there are these subtle energies. There are these subtle energies, and those subtle energies, they manifest the mental consciousness of the Buddha together with the mental consciousness of the Buddha, and the subtle energies, they manifest as a Buddha's body. Now, this is no longer the sutric explanation or the explanation according to the sutras, but this is really going into the tantras. But there's no harm in just mentioning it. The point being here, Jimmy, so there is a subtler type of body, but there's still consciousness that is not physical, but then there's also, the subtler kind of body, for us sentient beings, there's a subtler type versus a coarser type. For Buddha, it's always subtler. It's these energy winds that have been totally purified, that with the help of this purified mind that the Buddha has, appear as different forms. So they're rupa, they're actual forms. And then there's, of course, the mind. And that's also called kaya, but it's not in the ordinary sense a body. So this I just wanted to say. So don't be confused about the Buddha's mind. Like, it's not that his mind is really a body as such. It's a kaya. It's a body only in the sense of being a Buddha's qualities. So part of what a Buddha is, made of mind and body, basically. And even like in the sutric system, you talk, for instance, of the cessation of suffering. That's also described as a kaya. In fact, any quality that has arisen through the practice, through the Buddha's meditation practice, before Buddha was a bodhisattva, at that time, whatever has arisen as qualities, they're called kaya. They're all kayas, they're all bodies in that sense. Okay, but having said that, with Vesna Wallace's article, I mean, she explains this system of the kayas in a way that's unique to the Kala Chakra. Some things are the same as other tantras, but some things are unique to Kala Chakra. And like I said, it's too confusing without some background, without some better knowledge. And anyway, without initiation, we shouldn't study this in detail anyway. All right. Okay, so I hope I've gone into this a little bit regarding the article, because last time the question was also about the article. And then the substantiality. Okay, now, of course, the 16 types of emptiness, which we'll discuss, of course, today, we'll continue with them. They are very specific. They were taught by the Buddha at a time in India when people looked at the world, of course, slightly differently. If the Buddha came today, those 16 emptinesses, or maybe there would be more or less, I don't know, they would be presented quite differently, because we don't really describe a person nowadays by way of the 5 aggregates. In the Buddhist context, we take it on, but ordinarily we don't think of a person as having 5 aggregates. We don't talk of 18 elements and 12 sense sources. It's just different, and maybe substances would be part of that. But substances, so I think you're talking about matter, the matter around that seems so solid. Well, science helps us to understand that it's not solid at all. I mean, just if you take an atom, the nucleus made of protons and neutrons. So the size of this dense kind of nucleus versus the space within it. I mean, the space is so much larger than any kind of matter as such. Such as like the proton, the electrons, and so forth. So it's mainly, 99.9%? I seem to remember it's made of space. So matter, I mean, as solid as it seems around us, I mean, quantum physics can tell us that most of our existence is made of space anyway. It's not as solid as it seems. Okay, so on the conventional level, these objects around us, they seem solid. It's how our body reacts to them, touching them, the way they appear to us with shape and color. But of course, even modern science can tell us that that's just a mistaken appearance. All right. And if we grasp at the substantiality to exist inherently, does that keep us from becoming a Buddha? Yeah, of course it does. But so does grasping at the inherent existence of the I and the inherent existence of other phenomena. So it's not just grasping at the inherent existence of substantiality that keeps us. I mean, it's grasping at inherent existence itself. No matter what basis we grasp at inherent existence, it all keeps us from being enlightened. So just that much. And the rest will be more specific, but I can only do it next time. All right. I hope that wasn't too fast. I get carried away. I'm always thinking I should say it slowly, and then I get carried away. Yes, so hopefully this is a little clearer. Let me just add this much. Substantiality, something being very substantial. That's a word that's also used in Buddhist philosophy. substantially existent versus imputedly existent, which takes on again another meaning. Kind of really complicated, but that is more philosophy. We don't need to go into that. We have briefly talked about it. All the philosophical systems, they have basically a different view on it. Some are similar, but anyway, but this is not what we're touching here. But just substantiality, not in the Buddhist philosophical context, but just in everyday life, I think we need to differentiate something here. Conventional substantiality, so matter as being substantial, having a substance, okay. But I've also used the term to describe our wrong view of reality. So this is a way of describing inherent existence, or a way we perceive phenomena because of our sense of its inherent existence. So what am I saying here? As part of our practice, of course, we are trying to develop mindfulness in particular of our own mind. But even without mindfulness of our own mind, I think we've all noticed that there are certain types of mind. For instance, when there's fear, when fear arises, this fear is actually a non-physical entity. It's not matter. It's not a substance. Substance in the sense how we use the word in the West, or nowadays, independent of Buddhism. But it seems to be so substantial. It seems to be so solid and concrete, this fear, as if we're scared of it. It's non-physical. It's just the mind. It's not more than that, but it scares us. Or a problem. For instance, what is a problem? It's not physical. It's not mental. It's an impermanent phenomenon that is a non-associated compositional factor. It's this category of impermanent phenomena. Permanent phenomena can be divided into physical phenomena, mental phenomena, and those which are neither. There are these three categories. So that which are neither, impermanent phenomena which are neither physical nor mental, are described as non-associated compositional factors. So non-associated impermanent things. A problem is part of that. A problem is not physical, it's not mental. For instance, someone insults me. Okay, someone insults me in front of lots of people. And my mind labels on the basis of that problem. And it's a valid basis of imputation. This insult becomes a problem for me. So I label problem. So it is a problem in that moment because I label it as such on the basis of a valid basis of imputation. Does it exist beyond that as an inherent problem? Of course it doesn't. But to my mind, it does. It's inherently a problem. And because I perceive it as an inherent problem, I perceive it as very concrete. And depending on how much it upsets me, it almost turns into this mass, this dark cloud. It seems to be like this darkness I'm carrying on my shoulders. I mean, I'm sure we've all had bad days when things go wrong and someone says something and it remains with us the whole day. And really, it's just labeling it a problem. Then it seems to become a problem in and of itself. And then before long, it takes on this. It becomes something like a very concrete entity, this insult, that problem, this insult that's so dark, hovering about me, kind of pressing me down. It's almost like I cannot stand up straight because it's pressing me, right? We all know this, depending on the problem. So here, out of the sense of inherent existence, the problem, which is not substantial, merely labeled, and plus it does, of course, exist, but it's not a substance in the literal sense of the word. It's nothing, it's not matter, but it seems to be as concrete and substantial as a rock. And it hovers above us, maybe like a rock. Now, that doesn't exist. This is not conventionally existent substance. It's only a creation of our own mind. It doesn't exist. This problem, being such a substance, doesn't exist. And so it's emptiness. It's not emptiness. I mean, when we say the lack of inherent existence of that's not emptiness, because it doesn't exist. All right. Therefore, I wanted to draw this line, because sometimes I kind of use it when I try to describe the object of negation, that which we negate here when we talk about emptiness. What are we refuting? What are we negating? Inherent existence. But sometimes I describe it in the way I say phenomena seem to be inherently so concrete. They seem to be so substantial. And with this, I'm just saying that is our exaggerated sense in the case of a problem that is so concrete and so solid and so substantial. Okay, so there's substantiality in that sense, which actually doesn't exist. And of course, actual substantiality. These two, I think we need to definitely differentiate. Okay. I'm just checking. There's so many questions or so many. All right, no, there's no question. Okay. Now let's return to the text. How far did we get so far? Well, we've described the first 12 of the 16 types of emptinesses. Up to, we got to verse 199. Okay. The emptiness of intrinsic nature. That was the last one we talked about. So it's really just another way of saying the emptiness of emptiness. We've heard that there were two other cases where the Buddha himself actually, who described, it was not just Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti is just listing them here or just explaining these 16 emptinesses, but actually the Buddha taught them, as I said before, taught the 16 emptinesses in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, reminding us basically of the emptiness of this, the emptiness of that, the emptiness of inner phenomena, of outer phenomena, and so forth. And actually of these 16, 3 types are emptiness, of the lack of inherent existence or emptiness itself, but they're described from different angles, from different kind of perspective. So emptiness just in the sense of lack of inherent existence, or that state of lacking inherent existence of the I, for instance, or of any other phenomenon. That is the emptiness number 4, the emptiness of emptiness. But then you also have the emptiness of that which is beyond extremes. Again, it refers to emptiness, but now it's from the perspective of this lack of inherent existence, that state of emptiness, being free from the extreme of nihilism and reification. So from that perspective, that also lacks inherent existence. It's merely labeled. And then the last type we had of the 12 we've gone through, so number 12, is the emptiness of intrinsic nature. That emptiness itself is the intrinsic nature of any type of phenomenon. It's intrinsic, but here in the conventional sense, not intrinsically existent as an absolute intrinsic. No, it's natural. Intrinsic kind of means natural. So emptiness itself is natural to all phenomena. It's always existed with all phenomena. It's not the Buddha made it up, and once you understand it, suddenly things turn empty, and previously they existed inherently and so forth. No, it's a natural state of phenomena. They've always lacked inherent existence. It's just us projecting this intrinsic existence onto phenomena. No, it's their natural state. In fact, as we've heard last time, in the Heart Sutra, it says, form is empty, our body is empty of inherent existence, and emptiness is form. Empty is, our body does exist, although it lacks inherent existence, it nonetheless exists. In fact, it can only exist because it lacks inherent existence. If it were inherent existent, what would that be? It'd be like absurd. It couldn't exist, right? So it's the natural state of all phenomena. So from that point of view, we talk about the emptiness of this ultimate natural state of all phenomena. So therefore, emptiness number 12 is the emptiness again of emptiness, but from the perspective of that emptiness, which is empty itself, that emptiness being the actual nature of any phenomenon. Okay, now the next two lines, verse 200, the first two lines, they describe the emptiness of all phenomena. It's kind of like saying, well, we've already, why not just talk about the emptiness of all phenomena? Because all the other emptinesses, or the emptiness of all other things, other phenomena that we've gone through, they're all phenomena. Might as well say, right, emptiness of all phenomena. This would be like saying, the Heart Sutra, why do we go through no eye, no ear, no nose, and so forth? Why not just say no phenomenon, right? Say it with one sentence, no phenomenon. But of course, if you just say no, phenomena don't exist inherently, well, phenomena as in like this abstract phenomena don't exist inherently, like all phenomena, all right, but it doesn't really, it doesn't have the same effect versus going through them, each one of them step by step. In fact, when we really meditate on the Heart Sutra, for instance, I mean, just reciting it is not enough. We should really meditate. It says form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form is not other than emptiness. Well, then we should apply it to feeling. Feeling is empty, emptiness is feeling. Feeling is not other than emptiness is not other than feeling. And then discernment. We should go through at least the 5 aggregates and apply those 4, they're described sometimes 4 attributes of emptiness or 4 profundities of emptiness to really completely understand emptiness. So we should not just take any phenomenon we can come up with in the Heart Sutra. It's like eye, ear, nose, and so forth. All the phenomena, the way they presented in the past, well, all of them, and substantiality, by the way, this is for Jimmy, is part of form. Form as like form that is an object of the sense consciousnesses. There's no form, no eye, no form, no sound, no, and so forth, right? If you remember in the Heart Sutra. So substantiality here is part of that form, not just form, feeling, discernment as like referring to the body, but when it says a little bit further down in the Heart Sutra, there's no form, no sound. Sometimes it says there's no visual form. So here substance refers to form as like visual form, sound, all the matter, all the material things around us, they're the substantial objects. Maybe not sound. Sound is not really material in that sense. But other than sound, so visual objects, smells, tastes, and tangible objects, they're substantial, conventionally substantial. Okay, anyway, what I'm saying here is it helps really to go through all these different phenomena. And intellectually, we understand this intellectually, but it has to go away from this intellectual level. We need to really feel it. We need to really go through it. And it has a total effect on the mind if we take the time to go through each one of them individually. But here, in the first 2 lines of verse 200, when it describes all phenomena, it also gives like, in general, like including all of them to remind us of all of them. That's also helpful. Yeah, sometimes going through all of them, going through each and every one of them individually and contemplating their emptiness, and sometimes in the form of summarizing them. And this is what Chandrakirti does here when he says the 18 elements, 6 sensory contacts, and 6 feelings that arise therefrom. Only those 2 lines describe all phenomena. But you see, all phenomena, like even in the Heart Sutra, you have all phenomena described in the form of the 5 aggregates, the 18 elements, and the 12 sense sources, right? That's the 5 aggregates, obviously, form is empty, emptiness is, or even before that, that also the 5 aggregates lack inherent existence. So also means the person, and also the 5 aggregates lack inherent existence. And then you have the 4 profundities, form is empty, emptiness is form. And thereafter, you have a description that they're without characteristic, they're without increase, without decrease, etc. And then comes that whole listing of all phenomena in the form of the 18 elements, the 12 sense sources, and so forth. And that's here actually, again, a similar listing here of bringing all phenomena together is taking place here. We're just not used to it. So what are they? The 18 elements. The 18 elements, what do they refer to? They can be subdivided into 3 sets of 6. First of all, they describe the 6 objects, the 6 objects of the 6 types of consciousness. So not this. So this first just the objects of these 6 types of consciousness. What are these objects? Visual form, sound, smell, taste, tangible objects, and all phenomena that are an object of the mental consciousness. So really the last one is all phenomena, has already all phenomena within it. So anything that is an object of a sense consciousness. So from the perspective of being a visual object, from the perspective of being, an object of the eye consciousness, from the perspective of being the object of an ear consciousness, all the way to from the perspective of being an object of the mental consciousness. So just from the perspective of being an object, we talk of the 6 objects. So this is the first of the 18 elements. The first set of 6 are the 6 objects of the 6 types of consciousness. Then you have the 6 sense sources or sense faculties, which refers to the 5 sense faculty, eye, sense, power, and so forth, and the mental sense faculty, which is really the mental consciousness. That's the mental sense faculty, but the mental consciousness as a cause for a later moment of mental consciousness. Okay, so when we say the 6 sense sources, the 5 sense sources, the first 5 of the 6 sense sources, the first 5 refer to the physical faculty, the physical faculty that we need for a sense consciousness to arise. Because for a sense consciousness to arise, we need something very specific to do with the body, a sense faculty. So therefore, the first of the 6 sense faculties that are part of the 18 elements, so the first 5 of those 6 sense faculties are the physical sense faculties. But for the mental consciousness, you don't need a sense faculty in the sense of a physical. You don't need something physical. All you need is a previous moment of mental consciousness. A previous moment of mental consciousness then gives rise to the present mental consciousness. So here, the 6th of the 6 sense sources, the 6th one is really just a formal moment of mental consciousness, which enables me to perceive my mental consciousness in the present to perceive something. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more is needed for a sense consciousness. So these are the 6 sense faculties. And then you have the 6 consciousnesses themselves. Okay, so in other words, so the 6 sense consciousnesses, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, all the way to mental consciousness. So in other words, these 18 elements are described from the point of view of objects, the objects of the different kinds of mind. That's the first set. Then that which you need, the causes, the most important causes that you need for the 6 consciousnesses to arise, and then the 6 consciousnesses themselves. And of course, they overlap. Some are part of this category and also part of the other category. So some are objects at the same time as being consciousness. So of course, consciousness is also an object of consciousness. For instance, the mental consciousness, as of the first set of the 18 elements, the first 6, it's an object of a mental consciousness. A mental consciousness is also an object of a mental consciousness. But it's also a sense source. or a sense faculty in that it gives rise to a later moment of mental consciousness. Okay, so the mental consciousness is part of all three sets, the set of the 5 objects, the set of the 5 sense faculties, and the set of the 5 sense consciousnesses, or the 6 consciousnesses. Sorry, 6, so 6, 6, 6, 18. Pretty simple. I mean, it's an unusual way to divide things. And this is exactly what the Heart Sutra teaches us. First, the 8. Let me just go through. I have a copy here. It's Tibetan, but never mind. So if you read, yeah, so first the objects. No, not right. So at first there's the objects. Oh, here actually it's got a different order. I know it's got the 12 sense sources first, but then down in then it just kind of in a summarized fashion it talks about from the I element to the mental element and so forth, all the way up to that's actually as far as I remember like a summary of the 18, because kam here it says kam in Tibetan. Kam is sometimes translated as element and sometimes as constituent. Okay, so the 18 constituents, they're sometimes called, but Geshe Thupten Jinpa uses the word element, and I prefer that. The elements as we know them, the 4 elements, they should be called primary elements. Okay, the primary elements, or the foundational, the fundamental elements, because they're like the basis of everything else. But constituents, I mean, constituents also works. It's a little bit like the Tibetan version of atoms and molecules, right? Atoms are like the elements, right? The elements, like the primary elements. What is it? 92 of them, different atoms. So in the Buddhist philosophy, they describe atoms, but they don't talk of them in the sense of like the atoms, like we see them as the basic building blocks of the physical world. Instead, they talk of the 4 primary elements. The 4 primary elements. Those are the basic building blocks in the same way as we look at atoms nowadays. And then based on that, you have other forms that rise from those. You have the 18 elements, the way I just described them. Okay, no, but of the 18 elements, not all of them are physical. I should add that. Of course, not all of them are physical. Only the objects of the sense consciousnesses, visual form, and so forth. So some of them then are then the elements in the sense of the physical elements that arise from the 4 primary elements. So it's a little bit complicated, the physical description that you find in Buddhist philosophy, the way things are divided up. But, well, when you get used to it, it's not that difficult. Anyway, you have those 18 elements, and then the text goes on to say the 6 sensory contacts. Now, contact, of course, is described in many different ways. It gets very confusing. Contact can be described as a mental factor, as an omnipresent mental factor. Then you have of the 12 links, you have contact, which sometimes is described as something different to the mental factor of contact. Sometimes it is described, some texts describe it as the mental factor of contact, so different explanations. And here, contact, it's not really clear what is meant, whether it's the mental factor, or is it just saying an object, a sense faculty, and a consciousness coming together, right? To then give rise a moment later to a mind perceiving, I don't know, the color blue. Okay, so at the present moment is when an eye consciousness perceives the color blue. But in order for that color blue to be perceived, a moment earlier, you need to have 3 things come together. 3 things need to come together. So what come together, it's not literally come together as like they meet. And you'll see why they cannot literally mean the object and the sense faculty. Okay, they kind of meet in a certain sense. If you think of like modern science, well, the retina and the object, they kind of the object is reflected in the retina. Now, the Buddhist philosophical texts don't talk of the retina, but they talk of a subtle form that is part of the eye. I mean, that kind of fits. It's just called something different, but it makes sense to say that the color blue or the light waves, they hit, so the object, in this case, really the light waves, they hit the retina. So you have the object and you have the sense faculty. But you must also have consciousness in that moment. There must be consciousness. Because if there's no consciousness, now, a moment later, you can't have consciousness. Consciousness must be preceded by a former moment of awareness, which is why you must have contact in the sense that if right now I perceive blue, a moment before that, there must have been blue, there must have been a sense faculty, and there must have been a consciousness, any type of consciousness as part of my continuum. And they must have met in the sense that, well, they must have been close together. Blue needs to be close enough to be able to perceive blue. The sense faculty needs to be part of my body. And the consciousness that is, whichever consciousness it is, needs to be also be there as part of me. And if those three are given, then a moment later, you can have a consciousness perceiving blue. Okay, so anyway, that's the contact. Those three have to have contact in the sense of being in certain close proximity, existing at the same time. And that then gives to 6 types of feelings that arise from that. So through this contact, through those coming together, then that gives rise to experiencing things. So experiencing them. And here the context really just seems to be saying just those 3 coming together. It doesn't talk about contact in the sense how they're sometimes described as part of the 12 links, where there's already a discerning action of the mind taking place, at least understanding something is pleasant or unpleasant, knowing that without experiencing something as pleasant or unpleasant. Here it's really just saying you have the six sensory contacts. So contact with regard to the eye consciousness, which means the object, the sense faculty, and a moment of awareness. They come together to give rise in the next moment to an eye consciousness. That's the first of the 6. The second would be a sound as an object. A sense faculty comes together and a consciousness. They come together, and a moment later you have an ear consciousness perceiving sound. And then the same for smell. There must be a smell. There must be a sense faculty, nose sense faculty, and consciousness. And then all those being there, a moment later, you have a perception of smell. And moreover, what you have a moment later is also feeling. 6 types of feeling. You have feeling. Feeling is very important. A pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. Why is this important? Well, if you studied the 12 links, we know it gives rise to afflictions. Feeling gives rise to affliction. Okay? If we didn't have feeling, I don't think we'd have attachment, or a very weak form of attachment. Yeah, what would we attach to? What are we attached to usually? We're attached to pleasant feelings. What do we feel angry with? Unpleasant feeling, or that which we associate with the unpleasant feeling. And then ignorance is just this neutral kind of feeling, not pleasant, unpleasant. Well, I mean, our ignorance is there anyway. So if it's neutral, at least we have our ignorance. Okay. So pleasant and unpleasant feelings, very important. Anyway, so this is just for those who don't know. All right, so this extensive explanation. So you have the 18 elements, the 6 sensory contacts, and 6 feelings. And this is how Chandrakirti summarizes all phenomena. Okay, this is how Chandrakirti describes all phenomena. Now, then what you have next is, and this is a more extensive explanation here, you have basically starts with verse 200. Oh yes, what is it? I have to check myself. Oh, yes. So verses 200, emptiness of all phenomena. Oh, no, sorry. It's verse 200 and 201 lines. Yes, I forgot to mention that. All these phenomena are empty of themselves, or empty of inherent existence. Of themselves doesn't mean literally of themselves, but literally of themselves existing inherently. So the 18 elements, verse 200, and the first two lines of verse 201, these 6 lines, they describe the emptiness of all phenomena. The next 2 lines, the formable and so on, lack their own beings. This is emptiness of defining characteristics. That describes the emptiness of defining characteristics or of definitions. Okay, so you have all phenomena first, all phenomena seen from the perspective of just the phenomenon itself. Okay, so you have sound, you have visual objects, you have sound, you have consciousness. But these objects, just from the point of view of themselves, well, how do we get at them? How do we understand them? We understand them through their defining characteristics. So when I say table is just the thing itself. But how can I understand a table? Through its defining characteristics, through its main characteristics. So I can say definition, the definition of a table. A definition of a table is really just referring to its main characteristics. And definitions are really important in the Buddhist context. When you study philosophy, you study, in order to understand any kind of object, you study its definition. If I want to understand what emptiness is, or an ultimate truth is, a conventional truth, well, the texts provide me with a definition, and that usually describes its unique defining characteristics, but they lack inherent existence. So all phenomena lack inherent existence. All phenomena summarized in the 18 elements, 6 sensory contexts, and 6 feelings, as we've just heard. So they're merely labeled. 18 elements are labeled, 6 sensory contexts are labeled, 6 feelings labeled, of course, merely labeled on the basis of their basis of imputation. But then, how do we come to understand these phenomena? Well, through their defining characteristics. And again, they're merely labeled, these defining characteristics. Now, defining characteristic, that type is described by way of many different verses. So in actually altogether, it's from the last 2 lines of verse 201 to 215. Okay, the last 2 lines of verse 201 to verse 215. So it's 14.5 verses where Chandrakirti goes into the emptiness of all these different defining characteristics, well, seen as defining characteristics. There's first just a summarized, there's a brief presentation. So 201, that's just the brief presentation. The formable is just another way of saying form, physical form, that which is suitable to be physical, to be something physical. That's the definition of form. So here Thupten Jinpa calls it the formable, but it's actually that which is suitable to be a form. So form itself, something physical itself. And so on, they lack their own beings, they lack inherent existence. This is the emptiness of defining characteristics. So seeing phenomena from the point of view of characteristics. I mean, you can say that a table is an entity itself, but it's also a defining characteristic. It can be a characteristic of furniture, okay? So we look at characteristics more like adjectives, big, small, and so forth. But actually a characteristic doesn't have to be expressed in the form of an adjective. My impermanence, for instance, my impermanence is a characteristic of myself, and it's not I can say I am impermanent, and that's a characteristic, but the impermanence itself is also a characteristic of myself, my impermanence. My existence is a characteristic. I exist, so it's a characteristic. The shape of my body, for instance, the size of my body, having, I don't know, a tall body, a short body, that is a characteristic of me. Okay, and so everything can be a characteristic of something else. Yeah, so a characteristic, it's actually all phenomena are characteristics to a certain degree. They characterize something. Physical objects are characteristics of, particular objects are characteristics of the physical world. So this is therefore form and so forth. They lack inherent existence, and so therefore that's the emptiness of characteristics. That was verse 2 and 1, the last two lines. Then you have the next lines, and those, now it comes an extensive explanation. So the extensive explanation starts with verse 202. That describes now the characteristics from the point of view of being the basis, from the point of view of being a path, and from the point of view of being a result. Okay, now characteristics in general. Why do we need to learn about characteristics? We're learning about characteristics, all the different phenomena, as seen from the point of view of being defining characteristics of something else. Okay, so from that point of view, being the defining characteristics of something else, there's so many, because we're trying to understand reality. We try to understand, why do we try to understand reality? We try to understand reality in order to overcome our misapprehension of reality. And why do we try to overcome our misapprehension of reality? To be free from suffering. Okay? We try to understand reality in order to overcome our misperceptions and then to reach a state with the goal of being free from suffering. So what I just said was basis, path, and result. Basis is reality itself. How do phenomena exist? That is the basis for spiritual practice. Why is that the basis? Because it's my misapprehension. It's me misapprehending reality, how phenomena really exist on a deeper level, which is why I engage in spiritual practice. So the spiritual practice describes the path. What is the path? Well, it's developing consciousness, types of awareness that understand reality. Okay, so first I need reality itself. I need to have the basis of reality itself. And then I need to develop types of minds, different types of minds that understand reality. And based on these different types of mind, I eliminate whatever is in the way to me experiencing lasting happiness. And what is in the way? The misapprehensions of reality, my misperceptions of reality, my ignorance, which perceive something that is not reality. So that is then eliminated in the form of, well, when I've reached the elimination of those, that is called the result. Therefore, defining characteristics are here explained from the point of view of, and of course, their emptiness. In the end, their emptiness is described. But first, before we understand the emptiness of X, Y, and Z, we need to understand what does X, Y, and Z refer to. So say the emptiness of defining characteristics. What are defining characteristics? How can I divide them? And here they're divided into the basis, the path, and the result. Okay, so the basis describes reality. Sometimes the basis is described as the true truth. Of course, all phenomena are included in the true truth. And then the path is the mind that realizes the true truth. And then the result is the two bodies of a Buddha. One associated, one relating to the ultimate truth and one to the conventional truth. This is how it's usually described. But here, Chandrakirti doesn't describe it from the point of view of the true truth. How does it describe the basis? Well, if we look at verse 203, 202 to 204, it describes first the five aggregates. The five aggregates, 203 and 4, yep. The five aggregates, the 18 elements, and the sense sources. as they're described also in the Heart Sutra. So what is described in the Heart Sutra is as the basis, the 5 aggregates, the 18 elements, and not contact and feeling, and as we had early on, but the 6 sense sources, where he calls them sense fields, the 6 sense sources. 12 sense sources, the 12 sense sources. So I'll repeat: 5 aggregates, 18 elements, and 12 sense sources. Let me just make sure I didn't make a mistake. Yes, I believe it's the 12 sense sources. Yes. All right. Those are the bases, and they are described from the point of view of being a defining characteristic, as a basis and a defining characteristic, the defining characteristics of what is the basis that we need to know. Okay, so previously the 18 elements were also mentioned, but they were mentioned as part of that which exists. Now they're mentioned from the point of view of being characteristics. And of course, as part of being characteristics, having understood defining characteristics as being, as referring to the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates are my characteristics. Who am I as a person? If you want to describe me as a person, what characterizes me? My 5 aggregates. What characterizes the environment? All of us, everything in here? Well, the 18 elements. What characterizes that which we need to perceive something? The 6 sense sources. So those are the defining characteristics from the point of view of the basis of reality we need to realize. And do they lack inherent existence? Of course. So basically what these verses tell us is of the defining characteristics that constitute the basis that we need to understand, 5 aggregates and so forth. Well, all of those lack inherent existence. Oh gosh, when I just read it, it was so not complicated, but when I explain it, I realize it's so complicated. I hope you didn't get too confused. I also don't know how much background you have. Some of you may have heard this so many times you get bored, but some of you may not know exactly when I say 18 elements, 16 sense, 12 sense fields, like actually 12 sense sources would be the word I prefer, but she's definitely got a good reason calling them sense fields. I'll explain them next time. We're already a little bit late. So after this bombardment with different ideas, as usual, we do some meditation. We've got a few moments of breathing, so just let go of whatever confusion if you can. And then I take you through the meditation, a little bit of what we just went through today, just for you to be able to digest it better. Okay, mentally digest it better. Yeah. So what does Chandakirti tell us about the 13th of the 16 types of emptiness? It tells us that all phenomena which are described as the 18 elements. The 6 sensory contacts. And the 6 types of feeling associated with the 6 types of consciousness. And these are including everything that exists and therefore refer to all phenomena. But that they all lack inherent existence. The 18 elements do not exist from their own side. Of these 18, the first 6 are the objects of the 6 types of consciousness. That are also merely labeled. Taking a visual object, for instance. Any type of visual object, whatever it may be. Is merely labeled on the basis of its parts. And dependence on appearing to our eye consciousness in a certain way. Without having any intrinsic existence. In fact, it is in dependence on type of awareness, an action of perceiving something, or the action of perception, that we label something an object. And without consciousness, without perception, there wouldn't be any object. And then of the 6 sense faculties, which are also part of the 18 elements, they are merely labeled in dependence on the resultant awareness. That they give rise to. With a physical basis that gives rise to an eye consciousness, being labeled eye sense faculty. And the physical entity that gives rise to an ear consciousness as its empowering condition. We call that ear sense power, and so forth. And then now the 6 consciousnesses themselves. They are labeled in dependence on the moments of awareness that make up their continuum. But also in dependence on certain objects appearing to them. And in dependence on the perception of these objects. Dependence on all those, we label eye consciousness or ear consciousness, and so forth. And then there are the 6 types of sensory contacts, which besides the 18 elements are also mentioned as part of phenomena. So those taking, for instance, the eye sensory contact, that is merely labeled in dependence on a visual object, a sense faculty, an eye sense faculty, or eye sense organ, and a moment of consciousness coming together to then give rise a moment later to an eye consciousness. Dependence on that, we label eye sensory contact. And in a similar fashion, ear sensory contact, and so forth. And then there are the 6 types of feelings, which are so important to our life. Most of our actions revolve around the way something makes us feel. Does it lead to a pleasant feeling? An unpleasant feeling? Or a neutral feeling? Yet these feelings are also merely labeled. Based on certain sensations. Which may sometimes appear as unpleasant or sometimes pleasant. And dependence on many sub moments of experience. Dependence on our thoughts and so forth. We label pleasant or unpleasant and so forth. So all phenomena which is another way of saying our reality, which is just the summary of all the objects our mind perceives. And those minds themselves. They are all merely labeled, do not exist from their own side. And now to conclude your analytical meditation, take a moment to focus on whatever insight you've come to, and single-pointedly just focus on that insight. And allow this to become part of your subtler types of awareness. Sink deeper into your emotional aspect of the mind. And then all that's left is to dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated together here today. May this, of course, become a cause for us to truly be of benefit to all sentient beings by way of becoming fully enlightened, so that we can most effectively lead others to that same state. And since we need the guidance of our spiritual masters, our lamas, let's take a moment to also dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated towards the very long and healthy life of our lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all our other spiritual masters. May they live very long and continue to teach and guide us. But may the positive potential we've accumulated also help sentient beings right now. May it affect them in a positive way. In particular, those who are ill right now, like Geshe and Tali Lubin, and everyone else who's physically ill, but also mentally ill. May they recover very, very soon. And of course, let's dedicate the way Shantideva describes it. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, this was a little longer than usual, a few minutes longer. And I'll just, what that remains is to remind you, of course, of your homework, if you like, for what to practice this week. Like I said, awaken your Buddha nature by way of focusing on deep compassion, great compassion towards all sentient beings. And of course, not just the wish for them to be free from suffering, but also the wish you yourself being able to bring this about, to protect sentient beings through leading them out of suffering, away from suffering. And of course, then combined with bodhicitta for this coming week. So please make an extra effort. And I'll see you again next Sunday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Rachel.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you, Geshe-la.